Most people think that to win in the financial markets, you got to have some kind of crystal ball, right? That you have to predict what's coming next. But what if I told you the most successful pros don't predict at all? Today, we're going to dive deep into a professional trading strategy that completely flips that idea on its head. This is a system built not on forecasting, but on knowing exactly when the odds are stacked in your favor and having the discipline to only act then. The whole strategy we're breaking down today really comes down to this one single shift in mindset. It's about moving away from the impossible game of guessing the future and stepping into the professional's game of measuring the present. It's about ditching that crystal ball for good and instead picking up a deck of cards to figure out the odds right here, right now. And to really get how this works, we're not even going to start on Wall Street. Nope, we're headed to a blackjack table in Las Vegas. Because the logic? It's pretty much identical to how a professional card counter systematically beats the house. Now look, Hollywood gets this wrong all the time. Real card counting isn't some crazy memory trick where you memorize every single card. It's not magic. A pro card counter has absolutely no idea what the next card is going to be. They just know one simple but powerful thing: the overall state of the deck that's left to be played. Their whole process is built on two things: patience and discipline. First, they measure. They just sit there making these tiny little bets, and they're just tracking the ratio of high cards to low cards. Step 2, they wait. They do practically nothing until the deck gets hot, when it's loaded with face cards and tens. And only then, step 3, do they bet with discipline. They seriously ramp up their bet size. But the second that edge disappears, they're right back to making tiny bets and waiting. Okay, so how in the world does this casino logic apply to trading? Well, let's translate this exact framework over to the financial markets. The V4.5 strategy, you can think of it as being a card counter, but for Wall Street. So the key question becomes pretty simple, right? In the market, what is the deck of cards? And maybe more importantly, how do we count it to know when the odds have finally shifted in our favor? Well, the answer is market volatility. And the tool we use to measure it is the VIX index. You've probably heard of it. It's often called the fear index. It's just a single number that tells us how much uncertainty the market is expecting over the next 30 days. For this V4.5 strategy, the VIX is, it's everything. It is the card count. And check this out. The analogy lines up perfectly. In blackjack, you're tracking the state of the deck. In the V4.5 strategy, we're tracking market volatility. The card count, that's just the VIX index level. A hot deck, that's a VIX between 17 and 19. Placing a big bet is the same as selling an SPY put spread. And bankroll management is what we call dynamic position sizing. It's a direct one-to-one translation. And just like that card counter who spends most of their time just sitting there waiting, this strategy is incredibly selective. Because it refuses to play unless the conditions are perfect, it only averages about 9 to 10 trades per year. This is not about being in the action all the time. It's about waiting for a very specific, conditional opportunity. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. This is not about gut feelings or, making a judgment call. The entire system is run by a strict, totally mechanical set of rules that dictates every single move. It all starts with the VIX. This is the strategy's #1 filter. A trade is only ever even considered under two conditions. First, you have the primary zone. That's the perfect hot deck when the VIX is between 17 and 19. Then there's the secondary zone, which is when the VIX is higher, but, and this is critical, only if volatility is actively falling. This is so important because it stops the system from jumping into a trade while fear is still climbing. So when the VIX finally gives the green light, what's the actual trade? Well, the system sells a very specific options position. It's called a put spread on the SPY, which, as you know, tracks the S&P 500. To put it simply, this is basically a bet that the market will not have a huge drop within the next 35 days. The goal here isn't to guess the market's direction. It's to profit from the simple passage of time, what we call time decay, but only when the odds are firmly on our side. And this is where the risk management really shines. Just like our card counter, the strategy bets more when the edge is strongest. So when the VIX is down at 17, that's the sweet spot. It places its maximum bet. But as the VIX creeps up towards 19 and that edge gets just a little bit weaker, it automatically scales back the bet size. It's just disciplined, systematic bankroll management, plain and simple. But of course, no strategy wins 100% of the time. Not even one with a powerful statistical edge. A bad hand is always possible. So, how does a system that's built entirely on probabilities handle that inevitable losing trade?
Now, this might sound absolutely crazy to a lot of traders, but this strategy is explicitly designed with no traditional stop loss. And here's why. The source material explains that for this specific kind of system, a short volatility system, a stop loss can actually do more harm than good. It would force you out of a trade during a temporary panic, often right before the market snaps back. You'd basically be giving up your edge at the absolute worst moment. So instead of a reactive stop loss, the strategy uses something way smarter, a proactive, pre-funded hedge. Just think of it like built-in insurance for every trade. It's this integrated mechanism designed for one thing, to protect against a sudden, nasty spike in volatility and put a hard cap on any potential damage.
And you might be asking, well, who pays for this insurance? The trade itself does. On every single trade, 22% of the initial gross profit you collect is immediately set aside to fund this insurance policy. It's not an afterthought. It's a non-negotiable cost of doing business that makes the whole system that much stronger. The risk management is literally baked into the DNA of every single position. But does it actually work? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. The audited records show this perfect real-world example where the market moved violently against one of the positions. The potential loss was heading for over $8,000, but the VIX spike hedge kicked in exactly as it was designed to, paid out, and slashed that final loss down to just over $2,800. I mean, that is structural protection in action. All right, so the theory is solid, the logic is totally compelling, but what about the bottom line? Right? Does this disciplined, probability-based approach actually make money in the long run? Well, let's take a look at the audited results over a 6-year period. So get this, from 2020 through 2025, the strategy cranked out a win rate of 96.5%. That's 55 winners out of 57 total trades. And remember, these trades were only placed when the conditions were perfect. That kind of consistency is just powerful proof that the statistical edge this whole strategy is built on is the real deal. But look, a high win rate is only half the story. The other, absolutely crucial piece of the puzzle is this. The average winning trade was way bigger than the single worst loss on record. The average gain was over $4,300. And the worst loss, yep, that's the one where the hedge kicked in, was capped at just over $2,800. That positive difference, that's the mathematical engine that drives long-term profitability. And for those of you who love the details, we've got the full performance stats right here. And what's really telling isn't just the total profit, which was almost $250,000 over 57 trades. No, it's this last number right here, 0 catastrophic losses. The fact that the system never had a single major account-blowing drawdown is probably the strongest possible proof that this whole risk management framework we just talked about works. And this really brings us to the core insight of the entire strategy. And it's summed up perfectly by this quote from the source material. Most investors want constant action. Professionals want conditional opportunity. That desire to always be in the market, to always be doing something, that's an emotional need, not a statistical one. And ultimately, that's the real takeaway here. The edge isn't in trying to predict the future. It's in measuring the present and then having the discipline, the patience to just wait until the odds are finally tipped in your favor. Thanks for tuning in.